speech and language pathology field. I'm your host, Danni Augustine, personal finance enthusiast and fellow SLP. So for today's episode, I really wanted to discuss a question that I get a lot whenever people are shooting me DMs on Instagram or sending me emails on the SpeechGoods website. This is a question that I get asked all the time about, Danni, I'm super excited about maybe I want to niche down into a specific niche area in our field. Maybe there's a specialty area that I think I want to do, but I'm not really sure. I'd like to gain more information. How do I prioritize taking all of these trainings that I want to take? Especially because for many of us, we're coming out of pocket for having to pay for these. And that is just kind of the reality of how it is. And quite honestly, I don't think that this issue is addressed enough in our field. I think everyone wants to just kind of say, oh, go take courses and learn and enjoy learning. And hey, look, I love learning as much as the next guy. Like, I'm actually a little bit addicted to continuing education hours. But the reality is that these can be very expensive, and rightfully so, right? You have these experts, these teachers that are coming in and sharing the specialties in their particular niche area and in their field that have taken them years and lots of money themselves to be able to put on these courses. And the reality is a 2-day course can go anywhere from maybe $300 to $500, and most of us don't have that kind of money just lying around. And again, these course creators, these people that are putting on these courses, they're charging a fair price and a fair and reasonable wage for what it is that they're doing. So we as professionals, we just need to discuss what's going on. Some of us are lucky enough to get reimbursed by our employer for a certain amount each year. I know at one employer I used to work for, we would get $1,000 a year in CEU reimbursement. We just had to get the CEUs approved by our boss before we would take them and get reimbursed for them. But unfortunately, not everyone has this available to them. And it can be very overwhelming looking at $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of coursework that you want to take and that you would love to take, and figuring out, okay, can I take all of this right now? Which one should I take first? Like, blah, I just have absolutely no idea what I should do. So for today's episode, I really want to just give you some things to consider to help you make decisions for prioritizing these trainings that I'm sure are super valuable and that you want to take to be able to better serve your patients and your community. The first thing that I want you to do is something that might seem obvious, but when we're in the moment and looking at all of these different course names and course prices, and do I take this reading course or do I take this reading course? It can all just be like, blah, overwhelming. So the first thing that I really want you to do, and the first thing that I did whenever I was niching down into myofunctional therapy, is to get organized. I want you to make a list of all the courses that you want to take. I want you to also look at the prices for those courses and list all the prices for the courses, as well as upcoming dates for these courses. And you're even going to want to include if these courses are offered online, if they're offered on demand, if they're only offered on certain dates. And because I just love you oh so much, I've actually made a template for you in the Google Doc-esque form so that you can use that to get yourself organized with all the different courses that you want to take. If you want that for free, you can just go to the link in the description or go into the link in the show notes, depending on if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this on the podcast. The reason I've put this first is because you really need to see all of the information listed out in place so that as I go through these next few points, you can use that to make your decision. Honestly, anytime I've got to make a decision about anything, especially when it comes to spending my money, hello, you know your girl does not play with her money. He or she with the most information is significantly increasing the likelihood that they're going to make a better decision. Quite honestly, everyone has different priorities, different skill sets, different resources, different amounts of money available to them, different amounts of time available to them. For some people, if you're a single Pringle and you're just doing your thing, a week-long course may be more feasible than someone who's got 3 kids at home who are all under the age of 3 or 4. The second thing I want you to consider when prioritizing when to take courses is really, I want you to think about what are your goals. Are you trying to niche down into a specific specialty area? Are you trying to open a business where maybe you're offering services in that particular niche area? Are you working for an employer who has a specialized clinic that wants you to specialize in these certain areas too? Or maybe you're working in a practice and they want you to help grow a certain program. Maybe they want you to grow their feeding program or grow their reading intervention program or grow their AAC program. So I'll just use myself as an example. So for me, I was working at a private practice. It was a much more generalized private practice. I was the first full-time speech therapist there. And I knew about a year in that I wanted to leave that particular job and open up my own private practice because I really wanted to niche down into my specialty areas. I have my certified academic language therapist credential, so I do a lot of dyslexia intervention, reading intervention, and I also do feeding and myofunctional therapy. Those were kind of my big loves, and those were the areas that I wanted to spend my time learning more about. I wanted to spend my financial resources learning more about, and ultimately those were the patients that I wanted to see. So when I knew that I was going to be niching down into those areas, I really looked at what courses were going to make me as independent as I possibly could, because at the time there was nobody around that I could work for that could mentor me in these areas that I didn't have a ton of experience in. So I really wanted to get courses that were going to be helpful in getting me as independent as possible, but also when looking at different memberships that are being offered or course offerings that I was looking at, I wanted to see which ones would also allow ongoing communication and ongoing mentorship. Because again, for me, I would have loved to have worked underneath someone who was doing all the things that I wanted to do, and ideally that would have been great, but that just wasn't available at the time in my area. So, you just do what you gotta do, right? So instead, I just made sure that whenever I was paying for courses and paying for memberships, that I was using things that was going to help build me where I was at. Number 3, about how to prioritize all of these trainings and make it a little bit less overwhelming, is I want you to think about what you need to learn versus what you may want to learn. I think I admitted this at the beginning of this episode. I am like 100% addicted to continuing education hours. I find learning fun. I find it fascinating. And I'm sure many of you out there as SLPs or OTs or PTs find learning to just be interesting. I love it when I can learn things that I can use in the therapy room. I think AAC is very interesting. I think treating adults with aphasia is very, very interesting. But it all goes back to the previous point that I made about what are your goals, right? So if my goal was to have a very niche private practice, it wasn't really going to serve me to spend a lot of my time and financial resources on learning about those other things. I know for me, I can almost get really distracted. It's very easy for me to get distracted by things like, oh, this cool course over here and this course over here, especially whenever you're talking to and listening to people who that particular area or whatever it is their passion. It gets you excited about it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's within my scope. That looks so cool. I want to do that, blah, blah, blah. But you really need to remember what your goals are, because I love this phrase in the financial world, and I think it applies to pretty much anything you're spending your money on, but especially when it comes to how we're going to prioritize which trainings we're going to take first. You can afford anything, but you can't afford everything. Another great example is that I found like auditory verbal therapy to be extremely fascinating. I took a little elective course on it whenever I was in undergrad. I just think it's so cool. There's actually a girl at my church who's an audiologist, and she does sign language. I think sign language, it's just so beautiful. Like, I love it and I really appreciate it, but that's just not the niche area that I'm interested in, and that isn't really a part of my goal, and it's not really part of my goals right now. Who knows? Maybe it will be in the future, because I do find it to be such a beautiful mode of communication. But anyways, right now I'm not gonna go spend $2,000 on all of these specialty courses for auditory verbal therapy or sign language or anything like that, when that doesn't really align with the goals that I have for myself and my future. That doesn't mean that I dislike those things. It doesn't mean I don't find those things interesting. But again, you really just need to think about, what are you trying to accomplish? number 4 on how to prioritize trainings. This is probably the one that no one ever really wants to talk about, and you know how I feel about things that people don't want to talk about. We're just going to talk about them. So number 4 is, how are you going to pay for them? For some reason, this is a very sore subject, especially within our field. This is something that isn't really addressed very often, but I find it is one of the largest barriers to people pursuing continuing education and taking courses. And it's not a good or a bad thing. You're not a bad person for saying, I don't want to spend that money on a course. It just is. Especially if you don't have an employer who's going to pay for courses for you, or say you work for yourself, which, by the way, just a quick tip, if you are self-employed, if you are an independent contractor, aka you get a 1099 come tax season instead of a W-2, any continuing education courses that you take are actually tax deductible. So make sure you're saving all your receipts for that and give those bad boys to your accountant. But anyways, I digress. So kind of like I said in the beginning, on average, maybe a 2-day course can be anywhere from $300 to $500. And honestly, I would say they err more on the $500 range, I'm just being honest. And most of us don't just have an extra $300 or $500 lying around. You got bills, boo, right? Many of us you have a car payment, you have a mortgage, you got babies you gotta feed and put in daycare. It just is what it is. My first piece of advice to people who come to me and they immediately say, I would love to take this course, but I don't have the money for it right now, is that you have to budget for it. You have to prioritize these things if these are things that you want to be able to do. For me, I saved up for all of these courses in advance. So remember my first tip about getting organized and how you're going to go download that freebie spreadsheet that I made for you so you can keep it all track of all of the things and all the prices and whatnot, because you're going to need that information if you want to save up for it, right? You got to know how much money to save up so that you can save up that much amount of money, right? That kind of sounds like I kind of confused myself a little bit with that. But anyways, so say that you know that there's this course that you want to take that's $400. So maybe you can set aside $100 for 4 months, or maybe you can set aside $200 for 2 months to be able to save up and take that course. Now, if I said the word budget and you heard me say budget and then you just did like a cringe, like, Danny, I don't want to talk about that. Like, let's just scooch that under the rug. Let me tell you, although this video and this episode is not about budgeting, budgeting is going to be really important if this is something you want to do. If you're listening to this episode, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a reason that you clicked on this, right? There's probably trainings that you want to take. You want to better yourself as a professional. Like I said, maybe you want to niche down because you want to increase your income potential by opening a business or becoming a supervisor wherever you're at. But at the end of the day, if this is something that you want to do, you have to prioritize it and you have to plan ahead for it. So I don't want you to cringe at the word budget. If you want to learn more about budgeting, definitely go to my Instagram handle below. I have a bunch of resources for you there on budgeting. I have my Budget Without Burden course. I'll include a link for that as well in the description and in the show notes so that you can go take a look at it. I promise you, doing things like this, budgeting for things that you want, it's not scary. Once you get organized, it's actually kind of fun. I know. I promise I'm not a freak. I promise I'm not weird. It's fun. Number 5 for how to prioritize what courses to take and when. I want you to think about which courses can I take first and which courses should I take first. So for which courses you should take first, I kind of think of courses in a few different ways. There's courses that are more introductory and more general, that are geared more for people who are maybe just kind of interested in getting into that particular area or just want more of an overview, versus some that are more intermediate or advanced. So wherever you are in whatever area of speech pathology or whatever it is you're practicing that you want to get into, think about how much experience you have in it. So you may want to go ahead and take some of those more general courses first, especially if it's something that you feel you didn't really get a lot of coverage on in graduate school, before getting into those nitty-gritty courses. I think feeding is a really great example. I took a lot of great, more general feeding courses in the beginning of my journey towards being a feeding therapist and specializing in feeding. There were a lot of courses that I've taken within the last year that that are amazing courses, but I probably would have been a little bit lost had I not had those more basic courses in the beginning. Now, let's think about which courses can you even take. So, can I take this course? There's two things that you need to consider. One we've kind of already talked about, and that is pricing. So I told you about saving up for whatever course it is that you want to take, but you know, we're SLPs, and I tell people all the time, like, I don't do math, I'm a speech pathologist. That's why I became a speech pathologist. But I know all of you out there can 100% understand that saving up for a $400 course is very different than saving up for a $2,500 course. So I always encourage people to look at what is just available to you right now financially. If you do not have an employer that's going to assist you with this, which by the way, you can always ask. If your employer does not give you a stipend or whatever for each year, you can always set up time to meet with them face to face and see if this is something that they're willing to invest in you with. A lot of times if you want something for your employer, if you want them to pay for something for you or buy something for you, it's going to be something that brings value and adds value to their business, then many times like they may be open to paying for maybe not all of it, but paying for a portion of it. So don't be afraid to ask, and honestly, the worst thing they can say is no. But anyways, I digress. So insofar as can I take this course, the first thing we're gonna look at, of course, is pricing, because if you can't pay for it, you can't take it, boo. The second thing that we're gonna look at is just course availability. So now with the recent pandemic, so many things have gone online. It's actually been really kind of convenient for me. There's quite a few courses that would have taken me forever to be able to get to and take had the pandemic not happened. Silver lining, I guess. But so many things have been available online. So whenever you're getting organized for that first step and you're using your super duper awesome freebie spreadsheet that I got for you, that you're gonna click the link in the show notes in the description to get, you need to also look and see the dates that these courses are being offered. Is it on demand? Is it online but only on certain dates? That's something that's become very common, is that they're offering them online via Zoom, but they're still doing them live. Is it something that you have to go to in person? Because this is all going to affect how much it's going to cost you, right? A $500 course that I have to travel to is not the same cost as a $500 course that is a live Zoom course. Whenever you have to travel somewhere, maybe you have to pay for a flight, maybe you have to pay for the gas in your car, you have to pay for meals, all of these types of things. So you need to figure out which courses you could even take first, if they're even going to be available. For example, one course that I really, really wanted to take, it was honestly, for me, I wanted it to be one of the first courses that I took. The course was scheduled for like middle of March 2020, so obviously didn't happen. But the course was only being offered in person. So although I would have loved to take that course closer to the beginning of whenever I started getting into my niche and specialty areas, I actually had to just wait to take it because it was only offered in person. The sixth thing I really want you to think about when you're prioritizing these trainings is utilizing the SLP Facebook groups. Now, I know that sometimes these Facebook groups can be a little like overwhelming. Honestly, a lot of things on the internet kind of overwhelm me. It's just like, gosh, there's just so much information. Like I get information overload all the time. It's a serious issue I have. But there are dozens of SLP Facebook groups that you don't even have to post to. Honestly, if I'm looking for information and I go to a Facebook group, the first thing that I do is I search within the Facebook group. 9 times out of 10, whatever question you got, somebody else said that question and somebody else has answered it. A lot of times the moderators of these Facebook groups are super awesome and they even like categorize stuff for you. I'll go look in the files section. A lot of people don't realize there's a files section in Facebook groups. Yes, and people can upload files to the file section. I've gotten free therapy materials. I've gotten charts comparing things and whatnot from these free Facebook groups. One thing that I personally prefer if I'm looking for a course in like a certain niche area, I personally prefer to go to an SLP Facebook group that is in that niche area. Personally, I like the idea, if I'm looking for a really good feeding course, I want to go to a Facebook group that has a bunch of feeding therapists in it, right? If these are people that are doing feeding every day and this is something that they see often, I want to know what courses they're taking and what courses they have found super valuable in their practice. Again, especially if it's something that I don't have much experience in, but I want to get some experience in. Because there are some very large, more general Facebook groups. Like I think there's one called Speech Pathologist at Large or something like that. Large Facebook group, Speech Pathologist at Large. I'm pretty funny. But anyways, those are definitely groups that you can use. I just prefer looking in those more niche areas. And I also found that using the search option in the Facebook group has given me much more specific information that I was looking for. Overall, I hope that you were able to find some of these tips helpful, and I want to make sure to leave you with a few points. The first thing is that if the idea of having so many trainings, and everyone's got a training, right? There's so many amazing professionals out there who are sharing their knowledge in like these super amazing ways, but sometimes as consumers it can be a little overwhelming because you're like, okay, well, which one do I take? Is this one better than this one? Is this one better than this one? And a lot of times they're all great, right? So it can be difficult to make these decisions. One piece of advice that I'm going to leave you with is maybe consider doing some kind of membership versus taking a specific course if you're not exactly sure where you want to go yet. For me, when I knew I wanted to do myofunctional therapy, I had a very specific track of where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to take a 1 week long introduction course. It's kind of like the meat and potatoes of myofunctional therapy, if that's something you want to get into. If you are interested in myofunctional therapy at all, I know I've mentioned it a few times in this video. If you are curious about what that even is, I'm going to post a link to my other video about what is myofunctional therapy. It's also a podcast episode, so I'll post that in the show notes for you as well. But I will say that one thing that helped me when I was first kind of getting started, and one thing that I recommend to a lot of younger therapists, maybe you're a CF or maybe you're just getting out of your CF, and you want to learn, you want to get more information, but you're not sure if you even want to specialize, or maybe you just want to be a generalist and you want to just get a little bit of everything. You do you, boo, right? One great way to do that is with the membership. My favorite one, it's one that I use whenever I first got started. It's called Speech Therapy PD. I've found all of their courses are just such high quality. Like, yes, I'm an affiliate for them, but your girl reached out to them so that I could be an affiliate. Yeah, I did that. Now, on that front, the good news for you is that if you use my code SpeechGoods whenever you're registering for any of their plans, you will get 10% off. And your girl loves 10% off. Like, hello. And overall, don't be overwhelmed. Make sure that you're getting yourself organized. Use that spreadsheet. It's literally the spreadsheet that I use, but I made it a little bit prettier for you guys. And know that it is 100% okay to have all of these goals and things that you want to do, but it's also okay to just kind of take those baby steps, getting organized, deciding and prioritizing what you want to take first so that you can get there and get where your goals are and get where you want to be, and then go and do the dang thing. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a fabulous day, and as always, happy wealth building. If you want to hear more no fluff, getting the dang thing done stuff from myself and other real life SLPs, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or pledge a small amount on patreon.com/SpeechGoods. If you found this content valuable, please share it with others so we can get this message out there. And if you haven't already, join us on Instagram. Handle is @SpeechGoods. See you there.